It is time for another edition of VLGA Connect. Hello, thank you for joining us. I'm Chris Eddy. Good to have your company, whether you're watching or listening to the program, which is sponsored by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers and brings you the people, the issues from across the local government sector in Victoria and sometimes a little bit further afield. Let's look at what's coming up on today's show. As part of our state election series, we're going to be joined by the Shadow Minister for Local Government, Bev McArthur MLC, the member for Western Victoria, and a former councillor herself, to discuss the opposition's view on a range of local government issues, including rate capping, legislative loopholes, perhaps even data centres. That's coming up in just a little bit. Also today, the Mayor of South Gippsland Shire will join me, Councillor Nathan Hersey. He'll be here to talk about a shared council approach to FOGO services in Gippsland and his recent trip to Singapore to put his region on the world stage. But first, let's catch up on this week's Connect News. Well, the big story of the week, those private criminal charges brought against 5 Hepburn Shire councillors and the now former CEO Bradley Thomas by local businessman David Penman have been withdrawn in court in Ballarat. The Director of Public Prosecutions intervened and successfully applied for the charges to be thrown out. Mayor Tony Clark said the outcome was extremely pleasing, while in an official statement, the council described it as a great outcome for democracy and our community. Rural Councils Victoria welcomed what it called the dropping of baseless criminal charges, but said it does nothing to close the loophole that allowed the situation to develop. It's understood that the council, individual councillors and witnesses and Mr Thomas would be seeking costs from Mr Penman, described in court as significant. They'll return to court on that matter later this month. In the meantime, it's our understanding that those 5 Hepburn Shire councillors have been reinstated and there's no further need for the Minister to appoint an administrator. Speaking of the Minister, the Premier has appointed Tim Richardson as our new Minister for Local Government, also Consumer Affairs and Renters. He's replacing Paul Hamer, who moves to Roads and Road Safety. He only held the local government portfolio since April, and thus Minister Richardson becomes the 8th MP to hold the portfolio in the last 10 years. Sonia Kilkenny remains Minister for Planning and Attorney-General and takes on prevention of family violence. At Macedon Ranges Shire Council, there's a new mayor this week. Councillor Cassie Borthwick was elected at an unscheduled meeting on Tuesday, replacing Kate Kendall, who you'll recall resigned the mayoralty a few weeks back to contest the state seat of Macedon at November's Victorian election. Councillor Kendall remains a councillor. Councillor Daniel Young has been elected as Deputy Mayor. Well, 5 Western Melbourne mayors have joined together this week to call for more state investment in mental health, homelessness and addiction services to address the root causes of antisocial behaviour. Maribyrnong City Council Mayor Mohammed Semra was confronted by a man with a knife in Sunshine on his way to the media conference with the mayors from Wyndham, Brimbank, Hobsons Bay and Melton. Meanwhile, Brimbank Mayor Virginia Takos has released a statement after local shopkeeper Van Viet Truong died from injuries sustained in an alleged attack in Sunshine. Councillor Takos said the attack and Viet's passing have devastated the entire Brimbank community. Flags were flown at half-mast in Brimbank yesterday. Stonnington City Council will close rooftop parking at 2 council-owned facilities and seek a 50% concession on remaining spaces in an attempt to reduce the impact of the state's congestion levy. Mayor Melina Sear said the strategy aims to protect ratepayer funds while ensuring off-street parking facilities cover their own levy liabilities. Wyndham City Council's 6-month security patrol trial in Truganina has ended, with results now being reviewed after nightly patrols were introduced to deter antisocial behaviour and improve after-hours safety. The council says 973 mostly minor incidents were logged. Patrols were first responders in 10 cases, and surveys found residents' concerns about local crime fell by 37%. Wellington Shire Council has completed a review of its Wellington Library service and has confirmed that library services will continue to be delivered in-house as an ongoing council-run service. Melton City Council has introduced an updated accessible logo featuring its familiar blue sky and golden plains motifs. The new look will be rolled out gradually across digital, printed and physical assets starting this week. And finally, we go to New South Wales, where Kiama Library has had a surprise return, a book that's 150 years overdue. The rare 1858 volume, The Antiquities of Athens, was discovered inside a hidden tea chest in a sealed fireplace during a local home renovation. It originally belonged to the town's first library collection back in the 1870s. In today's money, the late fees would top $28,000. But the mayor there, Cameron McDonald, has waived the fine and the book will now be preserved in the library's local studies collection. That's VLGA Connect for this week. For more on these stories and more, listen to the Local Government News Roundup podcast, sponsored by the VLGA and available wherever you listen to podcasts. Well, as part of our ongoing series in the lead up to this year's state election on VLGA Connect, I'm delighted to have on the show today the Shadow Minister for Local Government, Bev McArthur, who's the member for Western Victoria and a former councillor herself. Hello, Bev, and welcome to the program.
Hello, Chris. Great to be with you.
Lovely to have you with us. Tell us about your local government background. You were a councillor at Corangamite, I believe, if I recall.
I was in the fabulous Lakes and Craters country, Chris.
Yes, yeah. Which is part of your electorate too, isn't it?
Oh, in the very centre of my fabulous electorate of Western Victoria region, which of course runs from Melton around the coast to the South Australian border and up into the Mallee, all of about 80,000 square kilometres. Does contain 23 municipalities in itself. So when I first got elected, I tried to engage with all those municipalities and I did so. And since then, becoming the Shadow Minister for Local Government, I've tried very hard to engage personally with all the 79 councils.
As a member, though, with an electorate that is so large, what sort of challenge does that present to you for trying to stay on top of all the various issues?
You're absolutely right. It's a challenge, Chris, but it's fascinating because we do cover so many topics, from agriculture to manufacturing to the cities of issues of Geelong and Ballarat and the regional cities of Warrnambool and Colac and Horsham and so on. So we cover often just about every subject, and local government impacts many of the issues that we deal with.
Yeah. So obviously we want to talk about your thinking and philosophy with regard to local government as the election comes closer. If you were to be part of a government and have the local government portfolio, we'd love to get your thoughts on a range of things. Can I just go through, just throw them at you and get your thoughts? Firstly, there's legislation in the Parliament that will close that loophole that saw us have Hepburn Shire Council, which I imagine is part of your electorate, basically become unable to operate because 5 councillors were stood down. Firstly, what's your view on the ability of someone to bring those private charges and do what happened there to a council?
I don't think it's helpful at all to democracy, to local government, to prosecuting transparency and accountability in any way, shape or form. And it took the DPP to intervene in the whole thing. The aspect of it that's in the legislation doesn't really fix it, but we would intend to make it much clearer that sort of activity is not acceptable.
Where is that legislation as far as you understand it right now?
Well, that's a very good question, Chris, because it seems to have died a bit of a death. It's not coming before the upper house this week, it's not coming before the lower house either for the second reading. So we're not sure whether the government's got cold feet on the whole thing. Anyway, we're ready to respond.
It would be a shame if that's the case, but of course there's been a change of minister, and I'll get to that with you in just a moment too. But are there any changes that you'd be pushing for in that legislation?
Yes, we want to totally resolve the issues as laid out that would affect Hepburn or similar, and also the Melbourne City Council issue. But also, we're vehemently opposed to the local government fair jobs code aspect of it, because I can see that the private sector play a very important role with local government, and it's important that local governments get the best value for ratepayer dollar by employing whoever they like in whatever way they like, whether they're contractors, part-time or sporadically or whatever. And I'm sure in the smaller councils, there's no way they'd be able to manage with all activities being conducted in-house.
The Fair Jobs Code aspect of this legislation is a bit of a sleeper, I think. I'm not sure everyone's really aware of the implications of that. Why are you so vehemently opposed?
Because I think it will add enormous cost, and not for what outcome. It's a solution in search of a problem, really.
Right.
And we know that Mr. Hamer, when he was the minister, said at the Labor Party conference that he was delivering this for the union. That was the purpose of this legislation. So I haven't found anybody that's excited about it. And apart from that, nobody was consulted. We first got wind of it when we found the $5.5 million allocated in the budget for a regulator. So then we started making inquiries. Nobody knew much, anything really about it. So we circulated what we knew about it to every councillor, every CEO in Victoria, and I've met with many, spoken with some of the peak bodies and so on about this. And, it seems that nobody or very few in local government were consulted, and if they were, they had to sign a confidentiality agreement. So I don't see any appetite for it.
Okay, before we get off the legislation, how big a risk do you think it is that we might see what happened at Hepburn at another council or other councils, plural, before this issue gets resolved?
Well, as I understand it, some copycat activity was occurring in the Latrobe City Council.
Right.
But, there may be others, I don't know. But maybe the DPP's intervention might have put paid to individuals doing this.
And the very real risk that there will be significant costs perhaps awarded as a result.
Well, that's the other thing about it. I mean, it's been very difficult for the people involved at Hepburn, and the CEO's resigned. I mean, incredibly stressful situation, and enormous costs being incurred by ratepayers in this situation. And that's unfair as well.
All right, let's get on to some other issues. What's your approach to rate capping? Would you maintain the current framework or make alterations?
Well, I totally support the concept of rate capping. How we do it, and if there are better ways, well, I'm always open to new ideas. But we're in a situation where rates were being applied at almost untenable levels, and so rate capping has assisted with that. Now, the issue really is what should local government be doing, and what should they be funded for by state or federal government, and what should the ratepayers be paying for? Now, it may well be that the situation should be clarified to the point where we know exactly what we expect local government to be responsible for and what we expect state government to be responsible for, because what has been happening is a serious effort of cost shifting by the state government, entering into activities in good faith initially with local government, but then withdrawing and leaving local government, therefore the ratepayers, to pick up the bill. So that has to be addressed. What both levels of government are responsible for and what they should be paying for.
So, to be fair, that practice that you've just described has been happening for decades.
Yeah.
Would you do something definitive to deal with the cost shifting element?
Well, I think we have to, because it's unfair on ratepayers, and I'm the ratepayer's best friend, so that's the position from where I come.
Right.
I want to make sure every dollar a ratepayer provides to local government is properly spent, properly accounted for. I'd really like an extra column in the Excel spreadsheet that might say outcomes.
Right.
And let's just check that every dollar is being properly spent. And I know there are areas we could probably look at that local government should perhaps not be involved in. So, yeah, I think cost shifting is an issue that we have to address.
Okay. We have a new local government minister. It's the 8th local government minister in 10 years, and 4 in 4, I think, or 5 in 4, or something like that. Whatever. Yeah. It's a lot of change, and many are saying it's a sign of a lack of priority being given by the government to local government as a partner. Would you agree with that, and what would your approach be?
Well, it does seem to get tacked on to other portfolios sometimes. I was very enthusiastic about being given the opportunity to be the local government shadow minister, because I think local government it plays an essential role in our society. So we've got to all work together, and I like the idea of being in a partnership with local government and working collaboratively as best we can to ensure that we get the best outcome for delivery of services. But as I said, with best, on a cost-benefit analysis, ensuring that we get the best value for the ratepayer dollar. The effort of all these changes of ministers. I think Mr. Hamer was the shortest local government minister in the history of the Parliament, so it doesn't augur well for the sector. So, but that's how the government approach things.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sure we'll do things differently.
Let me throw a few other issues at you. Data centres. A lot of people are getting very concerned about the approach to putting data centres perhaps on land that's been earmarked for housing or other uses. Do you have a position on data centres?
Look, that's also a matter for my colleague Richard Welsh. He's in charge of that area. We don't have a definitive position, but all these sorts of facilities need to be in an appropriate place with all the appropriate requirements and restrictions. So it's also a case that the Minister for Planning, it's David Southwick, has to be responsible for that. We certainly welcome investment in Victoria, absolutely. And, Victoria is now the place where nobody wants to invest, and investors are leaving. But they do need proper planning controls and, I think, real consultation with councils.
The CEO of the City of Greater Geelong has published an opinion piece this week. I'm not sure if you've seen it, about the data centre issue. And one of her suggestions is that there should be a new rating category to make sure that data centres are paying their fair share of the load, or those developers.
Well, I'm happy to have everybody's opinion in the mix. I think the Mayor of Geelong is Stretch Quantel. It may have been the CEO, was it? Ali Wasted.
It was the CEO's opinion piece, yes.
Yes, the CEO's opinion piece, yeah.
Okay. All right. Conduct in local government, councillor conduct, the framework that we've got in place has been tinkered with for years. Many say every iteration of that just makes it even more complex, and we have lots of arbiter decisions and panel decisions. What's your view on how that framework is working? Is it effective as it is?
Look, I think we've politicised the whole monitor system. And, I once said to Mr. Stakos that if he wanted a monitor, perhaps he should pay, and that might, slow him down a bit, because I think councils should be places of robust debate. We have robust debate here in the Parliament. Sometimes people are ejected from the Parliament for a period of time, hour or day or whatever. It doesn't really happen in the upper house. We're very well behaved. But the bureaucracy of council should be answerable to the elected councillors, and the councillors should be answerable to the ratepayers who voted them in. And I think this whole process of stifling debate just leads to unnecessary intervention by, monitors and arbiters and, processes of consultation or whatever it is. But I don't think it's helping the sector. I don't think it's helping local government be a robust, active operation that represents the people that elected them. They can be thrown out after 4 years. That's what should happen.
True, but 4 years is a long time to deal with, and I'm just playing devil's advocate here, to deal with these, what we're constantly told are rising levels of incivility in that debate that you're talking about. And some of those processes are instigated by councillors against other councillors. So do you not agree there should be some sort of a process to deal with those issues?
Well, look, we have to say, these are largely adults, as I see it, being elected to council. And we have adults elected to Parliament. And we have processes here if people have seemed to be egregiously misbehaving. And I think there's a lot of the code of conduct and the whole framework has been weaponized politically. Now, I don't think that's helpful.
So what would you change if you were the minister in terms of that conduct regime?
Well, what's working now doesn't seem to be helpful to anybody. And I actually can't see why, within the council, whether there's the CEO and there's other directors, maybe too many of them perhaps, but anyway, I can't see why it can't be worked out within the actual local government municipality itself. I think the constant move to get the minister to intervene is unhelpful. It's not a playground.
All right, perhaps one we might have the opportunity to come back to at some point in the future. The Emergency Services Victoria Fund levy has got a lot of councils concerned, and I know there's been a bit of a pause, but it's still there in the background, isn't it? What's your position on that?
Oh, well, we're pledged to repeal the Emergency Services Volunteers levy,
Right.
which egregiously does not go to volunteers by and large. It's propping up bureaucracies that were previously funded by consolidated revenue. So we'll repeal it. I think it was absolutely outrageous that the government insisted that local government be their tax collector and their debt collector. And I was very encouraged by the way councils all came together to notify their ratepayers that it was not a tax being imposed by local government. They were being forced to collect it by the state government. And in the debate, I raised all these matters with the minister at the table. Like, the whole concern about it would end up with somebody going into a local government office and, perhaps attacking the poor girl behind the desk. And the local government had nothing to do with it. So I think it was a terrible move on behalf of the government to do what they did. They're thinking they had a milking cow and they weren't ready for the repercussions, where an extraordinary situation occurred in the sort of coalition of the willing, so to speak, where local government came together with career firefighters, volunteer firefighters, farmers, chambers of commerce, the VFF, and so on. I've been and spoken at many rallies across Victoria to voice our concerns about it. And, I don't think ever before such a group have come together to say the government have got this wrong, but they didn't listen.
Perhaps one final thing before we let you go. Speaking of councils coming together, another example is, more than 30, nearly 40 councils have called for the curbside glass recycling mandatory rollout to be removed before next year. Do you have a view on that, and would you support removing that mandatory requirement?
Oh, we've already announced our policy on that, and that is that there be no mandate for the fourth bin. So that we are quite clear on that. I think the container deposit scheme is acceptable to many people, and we'll look at ways that can be expanded. But it's, and I spoke to many councils about this and consulted widely. And I was up at a council right in the north of Victoria, a small council, who took up the grant from the government, thought they were doing the right thing, and have their trucks, travelling thousands of kilometres. People aren't putting out the bin, and if they do, it's got very little in it. So it's an unnecessary burden on local government, and it hasn't helped in the recycling of glass in any case, it seems.
Before we wrap up, let's do a hypothetical. Post-November, if you were the Minister for Local Government, what will your first priority be?
The first priority will be to ensure that we actually organise local government to be the most efficient, effective operation that it can possibly be.
And how would you do that?
Well, I think there are ways that we can share services, that we can allow for far less state government intervention in the whole process. And I don't want, full-time staff working on compliance and rules and regulations and reports that sit on a dusty shelf somewhere and don't really add value to providing a better road or a better footpath or a better public space. I think that that would be the most important thing we could do.
Look, thank you for your time. We've covered a lot there, and I do really appreciate you being so open and honest with all of your views on those matters, and I hope we get to talk again.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Bev McArthur, the Shadow Minister for Local Government, our guest today on VLGA Connect as part of our state election series. Well, there's two very different stories intersecting in South Gippsland at the moment. One about what's going in your green bin and the other about what's coming out of a trade mission to Singapore. Food and Garden Organics collection has started across Baw Baw, South Gippsland and Wellington Shires, a joint rollout that the three councils have joined together on. And with me is South Gippsland Shire Mayor Councillor Nathan Hersey, who's just back from representing the region on the global stage as Chair of One Gippsland. Hello, Councillor Hersey, welcome.
Hello to you.
Good to have you on VLGA Connect. Congratulations on your mayoralty. Second time around. How's it going for you?
Very well, thank you. Yeah, it's a role that I absolutely do enjoy, knowing that I'm making a difference in our community and having an opportunity to bring the spotlight to a whole heap of things that are important to South Gippsland is certainly what drives me. As you know, it's probably not about the cash for any councillor, so
very true.
We've got to have something to keep us motivated.
Very, very true. And where are you today? I can see, we've got a lovely rustic background there.
I'm in beautiful Tarwin Lower, which is along the coast in South Gippsland. I've just done a tour with one of our councillors of a whole heap of local priorities around Venus Bay and Tarwin Lower.
And I can imagine there's quite a few of those.
There's plenty, yeah, but good to be on top of what's happening in this part of the Shire for sure.
Excellent. So let's talk about the FOGO service. Firstly, it started on the 1st of July for you in South Gippsland, a few days ahead of Bawbaw and Wellington. What's actually changing here for households?
So FOGO has been rolled out actually in the 4 municipalities, including Latrobe City, although their rollout is a little bit different.
Yeah.
But for the 3, South Gippsland, Bawbaw and Wellington, we've moved to fortnightly general curbside waste collection and weekly FOGO collection for our residents. That's the main change, but the bigger part is that as a region, with the 4 municipalities, we're working together to have our waste from FOGO collected and processed locally through Pine Grow over in Morwell. And that's a contract that all 4 councils have signed on to, meaning that that waste can be processed locally. And that gave a volume that would be suitable to have that facility set up in Gippsland to service the Gippsland Council. So that's a bit of sharing of resources, if you will, but also finding a common solution to a legislative change there.
That is a good story. So why the 3 separately and different to Latrobe? What actually looks different there?
Latrobe still has a weekly curbside red bin collection, and that's their decision. So essentially the legislation that we're all working within for FOGO means that we must roll out the service to curbside collection places. However, the way in which that's done by each of the municipalities is slightly different. And of course, the costs vary depending on the amount of residents that are involved in the service as well. So for us in South Gippsland, we're offering FOGO to all curbside, which is still only around half of our population in South Gippsland. And we don't have any special exemptions at this time for FOGO. Rural properties can opt out of the whole lot. Commercial can opt out of everything except for recycling if they wish to do so. But each municipality is doing it in a slightly different way. But again, it's the shared service of having a facility locally that is where we're collaborating well.
Yeah. So, yeah, look, it's a complex space, isn't it, to get it just right for each municipality. And that trade-off that you talked about, going to fortnightly collection for the red general waste bin, how is that being received in your community?
In South Gippsland, it's been fairly well received. Of course, we've had some pushback, as I would expect, and a change to a service is always going to attract a certain amount of pushback. And this is a change that happens inside people's homes, which is, of course, something that is more intrusive than many of the other decisions that council may make. This has been a long-term change that's been coming since around 2021 when the contracts were first looked into and agreed to. So it has been known, but perhaps it's one of those things that's not really evident until the rollout actually happens. What we know, though, in South Gippsland is that around 40 to 44% of our curbside red bin collection waste material is actually organic material. So based on those figures, it was agreed that we could move to fortnightly collections, noting that if people do the right thing and put the organic material into their FOGO bin rather than general waste, that it should be, in most circumstances, able to be accommodated. And then the other option, of course, is to double the size of the red bin for those that have larger families or special needs that need to be accommodated.
I was going to ask you that very point. So there is some flexibility for certain circumstances, but there's a big education piece and awareness piece here too, isn't there?
Yeah, correct. It is a big education and awareness piece. And one of the things that we are sharing with our community is certainly that the landfill levy is substantial and only increasing. And our estimates are that in the short term, this will reduce our landfill waste by around 30%. And we hope that will go up to around 50% over time as people learn to use the system properly and separate waste accordingly.
Mm.
And that eventually does equate to a saving for our residents and ratepayers as well, because we're not having to pay that landfill levy and also the costs associated with managing the waste at landfills. So there is a bigger picture here that we need to keep in mind as we look toward a new system and a new way of managing our waste as well.
As we mentioned, there's a state-mandated change for all councils to standardise recycling, and of course the glass collection's been pretty controversial. Where does your council stand on that?
South Gippsland is not supportive of the glass bin at this point in time. I actually moved a notice of motion which was supported by the entire council to actively push back on having that rolled out. One of the things that we would say with waste and with a whole heap of decisions that are made is that you need to have a local view and a regional view when it comes to managing a whole heap of our council services that are suitable for a rural and regional community rather than just a one-size-fits-all. And for us with purple bins, we have central collection points already. The container deposit scheme is also taking a lot of glass out of that system. And we don't see the value in driving a truck around, even if it is less regularly, to collect what is evidently a very small amount of recycling material.
As we record this a little bit ahead of time for when it goes out, there's been some rumblings that there might be some changes there, but of course there's a little bit happening at the state level as well. So we'll wait and see whether that mandate for next year holds. Can I ask you about your recent trip to Singapore to the World Cities Summit? What was One Gippsland doing on that stage?
So as the chair of One Gippsland, I was invited to attend the World Cities Summit, and Victoria was represented by only myself and the Lord Mayor of Melbourne. And it was a pleasure to be invited and to be a guest of the Singaporean government at that event. It was really an ideas and information sharing exercise where we could look at those sorts of things that are impacting local governments across the world, and realizing for me that Gippsland shares so many of the same issues, concerns, and emerging changes that we see all over the world. We're not alone in that. Along with that summit, which included a mayor's forum that I participated in, we looked at housing, water security, food security, and livability of cities in particular. The additional part that I participated in is the International Urban and Regional Cooperation Program, which is a program that 6 regions and cities in Australia have entered into with the EU, Gippsland being one of the 3 regions in that program. And through that, we're basically looking at energy transition, which is something that is happening in Gippsland at the moment, and the impacts on our community, also wanting to make sure that Gippsland sees the real benefits of that diversification locally. We don't want to be a place that hosts change without seeing the economic opportunity. And the other is about agriculture. So Gippsland, through that program, with the leadership of Simon Johnson, who's the CEO of Food and Fibre, he also attended the summit with me, is heading up a pathway to look at better branding for Gippsland and our high quality produce and outputs, traceability so that we can enter into new markets with our outputs from Gippsland, and also circular economy in the ag sector, with an overarching look at food security and protection of agricultural land. So 2 very important things for the entire Gippsland region there.
Indeed, and the state more broadly, I would add. I got to go to Singapore just a couple of months ago as a tourist, spent some time there. It's an amazing place, and I spent a bit of time at Gardens by the Bay. I think you got to see a bit more than the average visitor. You went behind the scenes. Tell us about that.
Yeah, correct. So Gardens by the Bay is an incredibly beautiful garden centre there that is right on the reclaimed land on the edge of the city. What I think a lot of people don't realize is that those concrete tree-looking structures in the garden are actually, I suppose, chimneys to let out vapor from a waste-to-energy facility that's under the ground there, which is something that I did get to look at. No, it's incredible, and I'm surprised how many people go there and are not aware. Yeah. So under the ground there is a facility that essentially turns organic material that's been turned into pellets into electricity, as well as heating and cooling. And it's another example there of how Singapore is recycling and reusing the green material and organic matter for energy there. So that was extremely interesting, and I think we've got a lot to learn in Australia and in Victoria, of course, when it comes to the way in which we can reduce, reuse and recycle. And there's perfect examples of that already working in other parts of the world.
Yeah, amazing. I would have loved to have seen that. So I think there was a bit of debate around the council table about whether the trip was going to be worth it. What do you say now that you're back about the value that particular experience brings to South Gippsland?
I was never one of the people who would think that there wasn't value in going and learning from other parts of the world. There is always some discussion around our council table around it, and of course part of it is because it is international travel. It was sponsored by the Singaporean government and by the EU as part of both of the two programs I attended. So the total cost to council was just over $200. For $200 worth of investment, I think that you could argue very heavily that even if one of the ideas that I come back with we could implement at a local level, the value is certainly there. Even one of the ideas I pitched to our council last week around having a localised, volunteer-based community approach to gardening and vandalism and graffiti, something that other parts of the world are already doing to keep older residents involved and active. That's something that will now go through a process with our council to explore further. There's going to be more than $218 worth of savings if we can get something like that going. So yes, I certainly saw the value in the trip and have come back with some great ideas for our council, but also Gippsland more broadly.
Excellent. Look forward to hearing more about those. I'm surprised there was even debate when it comes down to $200. Great to have you on the show and to hear about both the FOGO rollout and your trip to Singapore. Councillor Nathan Hersey, thank you for being on VLGA Connect.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Now, before we go today, a quick plug for the upcoming Global Live panel, which is coming up in September, giving you plenty of notice of this. It's on Thursday, the 24th of September. Councillor Conduct Models, Lessons from Across the Globe is the topic. It's happening from 5:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. A great panel being assembled to talk about code of conduct structures, enforcement and sanctions, ethical oversight bodies, and public and political trust. You can find all the details on the VLGA website, vlga.org.au. Looking forward to having you there for that discussion coming up on the 24th of September. That concludes our show for today. Thank you for watching and listening VLGA Connect. Thank you for Hunt & Hunt Lawyers for sponsoring our program, and we'll be back with you with more on another edition next week. Until then, bye for now.